Hi everyone, I'm Tyrona Heath, Director of Market Engagement at LinkedIn's B2B Institute think tank, where we investigate how marketers can create more value. We are a marketing strategy think tank. We work with leading practitioners and academics, and I'm really pleased to share that for this piece of work, we partnered with Professor Jenny Romaniak at the Ehrenberg-Bass Institute. Great mind on this topic. The core idea that I want you to think about as we go into this and as we think about relevance is that most purchases start not by searching Google, but by searching our memory, right? So if you believe that most buyer behavior starts with memory, then it follows that the primary job of marketing is not to generate clicks, but instead to generate memories. Memories are essential in the conversation about relevance, and we must remember that the most important search engine is still the one in our minds as we think about this idea of relevance. So marketing is in a leadership crisis today. Our career prospects are stunted because business leaders don't see the value in marketing experience. A recent Forbes survey showed that only 2.6% of the over 65,000 board members in our database have managerial level marketing experience. And this is really a self-fulfilling prophecy because marketers don't end up on boards. Board members just don't believe that marketing is important. There was actually a separate study among board members that showed that only 4% of them believe that marketing is an important experience to have, versus 47% who believe that finance is. And so the cycle continues. So marketers would be better off if we became more financial. Finance determines our budget and our compensation. So marketers should be more deeply invested in working with finance. One of the most valuable mental models in finance is capital allocation. Capital allocation is the process by which executives distribute their organization's financial resources. You assess the opportunities and the risks of different projects, and you make trade-offs accordingly. You do that to get focus, ROI, and it means that some capital has to be concentrated in areas at the expense of others. And so Warren Buffett said over time, the skill with which a company's managers allocate capital has an enormous impact on the enterprise's value. By contrast, our primary mental model is the marketing funnel, which isn't customer or finance centric. Customers aren't in the awareness stage or the consideration stage. Instead, I want you to throw that out and think about this completely differently. They're either in market or out market for your solution, in market or out market. And if they're out market, they're not thinking about your brand or your category at all. The problem with the funnel is that marketers believe the job of marketing is to move buyers in market. But ads don't move people in market. People move themselves in market. And that's when they experience a need for a solution. That's where relevance comes in. People move in market when they enter a relevant buying situation. And this is why the cash flow funnel is a way better mental model for us to work from as marketers. The cash flow funnel recognizes that buyers are either in market or out market, and that in market customers drive current cash flow and out market buyers drive future cash flow. And in this way, this funnel, the cash flow funnel, is both customer-centric and finance-centric. And this goes back to our 95-5 rule, which is one of our premier rules of marketing that you should definitely check out. We have way more on this online, but it says that 95% of category buyers are out market at any given time. This means that the vast majority of your growth potential lies in reaching people who will buy from you in the future. Of course, it's important for us to reach the 5% of buyers who are in market right now, and we do that with lead generation efforts. But too many marketers exclusively focus on that small cohort, and that places a lid on our growth potential. To achieve long-term growth, we have to reach the 95% of buyers who are out market today, so that when they're in market in the future, our brand is the one we think of. And that requires thinking of relevant buying situations. How do we do that? By brand building. And that's a matter of memory generation, not lead generation. Okay, so how do we do this? New term, category entry points. That's the key to messaging to the 95%. Category entry points help you message for memory and not just clicks. Category entry points are cues that category buyers use to access their memories when faced with a buying situation. So every purchase is unique, but you can imagine there's common recurring buying situations that lead buyers to find themselves in situations where they move from out market to in market. And by identifying these category entry points, we can really nail down those key buying situations. We can prioritize them and make sure our brand is linked to them, right? So category entry points influence which brands are mentally available in the decision maker's memory. And we want to form a list of their initial go-to options, right? We want to be in that. So understanding category entry points helps us build stronger links between our brand and the category's core buying situations. Therefore, when your buyer comes in and they enter the category, when they're in market, your brand has a greater chance of being what we call mentally available, which is the first step to being bought. The brand that's remembered is the brand that's bought. Messaging has a critical purpose in brand building. It links your brand to core buying situations. Unfortunately, today we're seeing far too much message fragmentation for this to be the case. So our LinkedIn data shows that small tech companies are running an average of 187 ad campaigns at any given time, where large tech companies are running an average of 2,400. So messaging fragmentation is clearly a problem across the board. So to become more financial, marketers we must become more disciplined with our messaging. We must be more intentional about investing in fewer messages that achieve more reach through consistent campaign commitment over time. Messaging is capital allocation for marketers. And so category entry points are key to understanding which messages to invest in and to commit to. They reveal the buying situations that matter most to your brand so that you can allocate your messaging capital there. So first, we'll walk through this category entry point roadmap to help you do just that. And we'll start by identifying all of the category entry points in a category. And you narrow that down to a list, maybe 5 to 8 priority relevant buying situations for your brand through that process of elimination. And then the overall goal is that by linking your brand to relevant buying situations, the category entry point roadmap helps you link your marketing team to your finance team. So the first step is to identify all buying situations in the category. You want to get everything on paper. And this can be done through an elicitation exercise if you have the budget to do it. If not, you can just talk with your marketing and sales teams. And what you want to put together is this W's framework, as you see illustrated by the brain on this slide. It captures all relevant core buying situations in your category. So you already know every buyer wants solutions that will make their company more innovative, more productive, and more profitable. But what are the unique triggers that buyers experience that lead them on a search into a relevant buying situation? That's what we want to get to. What helps move them from out market to in market? And this is what the W's help you define. They range from questions around why, so personal and professional motivations, to questions around what and with what. So one example could be a cloud computing software company. So of course buyers want this solution because they want to be able to store and share files in the cloud. But asking why they want to do that could reveal that they've been facing cybersecurity risks, which makes more secure file sharing really critical for them right now. Or asking with what may reveal that they need a cloud computing solution that easily integrates with Microsoft Office so that they can avoid adoption challenges. So by using W's, we can get to the distinct underlying reasons that buyers enter into that relevant buying situation for your category, and then we can start to message around those situations. But a key principle of capital allocation is making trade-offs, investing more in one area at the expense of another. We can't invest in everything. We wish we could, but we can't. So we need to narrow things down to the top 5 to 8 buying situations. How do we do that? With the 3 C's framework: credibility, competitiveness, and commonness. So starting with credibility, this is about your brand's ability to deliver a product or service that is suitable for that category entry point. It's part internal, so what products can you sell, and part external. What do customers perceive you being able to do? So for the latter, we can conduct a customer survey to assess what mental advantages and disadvantages your brand has, and also looking at your competitors. And in this way, you can start to eliminate the category entry points where your brand does not have a credible advantage. So a mental advantage means your brand is likely to be thought of in a specific buying situation. A disadvantage means your brand is less likely to be thought of in a buying situation. So what we want to define here is anything that has a strongly positive point threshold in terms of that mental advantage. So on this particular slide, you can see advantages are highlighted in green and disadvantages are highlighted in red. Yellow means that the brand situation is what we expect to see, which is typically the case. So by studying these things, we can start to see where we can eliminate the category entry points where our brand definitely doesn't have the credible advantage, and where we can get high credibility and high relevance for that specific buying situation. The same credibility data set will provide data on where your competitors have mental advantages and disadvantages. Using this peer-facing data, you can start to make decisions about where it makes sense for you to play. So for example, the communicate a more complex message category entry point scores as expected for LinkedIn, but company H has a mental advantage there. So since this category entry point is highly competitive, maybe it's not an area we want to invest in. So we looked at competitiveness. So lastly, let's look at commonness. So now we have a set of category entry points where we can credibly compete, but is it always worth it? In B2C, this question is fairly simple. It just requires asking ourselves how common a buying situation is. Take the coffee company, for example. My brand could consistently be the first one to come to mind when the coffee bean enthusiast thinks about roasting and brewing their own coffee. But are there enough die-hard enthusiasts taking part in this labor-intensive process to make that category entry point worth investing in? In B2B, this doesn't translate directly, since most businesses have common needs to begin with. Instead, we can begin to look at purchase frequency and deal size to assess the commercial value of each remaining buying situation. So certain buying situations might be very credible or competitive for our brand, but if they see low purchase frequencies or typically have smaller deal sizes, they may not be worth investing in. So by the end of this credibility, competitiveness, and commonness process of elimination, you'll be left with a long short list. 5 to 8 relevant buying situations for your brand to prioritize. So here we can see how this shakes out for LinkedIn ads. So we did a proprietary category entry points research with the Ehrenberg-Bass Institute, which you can see in further detail in our report online. So the green box signifies the mental advantage we have on board or senior management would approve. This is a category entry point we already have a credible advantage in, which we would like to maintain. On the flip side, we highlighted a communicate a more complex message in red because we decided to ignore that. It's just too competitive. And finally, the blue boxes are category entry points where we'd like to invest in building memory structures. These are category entry points where we have internal credibility and would like to invest so our external perceived credibility matches, or they're high commercial value situations that we'd like to invest in. So once you have this long short list, your job is to market around them. How? By creating messaging that simply, creatively, and effectively links your brand to those relevant buying situations. This is how you allocate your messaging capital to the situations that matter. Don't try to link your brand to more than one buying situation in a message. And don't message on a whim or at random. You want to be intentional about messaging in line with our long short list. So in this example, we can see that ServiceNow does this by highlighting the need for a workflow solution to avoid outdated IT meltdowns. Conversely, Monday.com advertises its workflow solution as an answer to simplifying complexity. Both are credible messages, but the two brands are making a conscious choice about where to play. You can also use your messaging to link your brand to an audience or stakeholder group that has low situational awareness as a whole. So we see Oracle doing this by linking their cloud solution to the fast food industry, which may not otherwise be aware that Oracle could be a potential business partner. So while Oracle is targeting fast food decision makers, HPE GreenLake is targeting decision makers with a distinct need for a solution that will fit their existing data ecosystem, not a one-size-fits-all model. These are all situational messages, but the brands are making conscious and informed decisions about where to allocate their messaging capital to most effectively link their brand to these core relevant buying situations. Brands that allocate their messaging capital intentionally will be able to build mental market share. So we see this in the data. Mental penetration is the blue line and network size are the brown bars. Take the business banking category example here with Barclays. They have the tallest brown bar. They have about 80% mental penetration, which means 80% of category buyers link Barclays to at least one relevant buying situation. And on average, those people who think of Barclays tend to think of Barclays in association with 7.9 buying situations. This means that Barclays' network size is about 7.9. So Barclays has the highest mental share in the category. They're linked to the most category entry points in the minds of most buyers. And not coincidentally, they're also the market leader. This is because mental market share maps to traditional market share. We see this in the data too. This business insurance data proves that category entry points drive customer acquisition. State Farm at the top is the market leader with 25% market share. They have more decision makers with 6 or more category entry points illustrated by the green bar, and fewer decision makers with 0 category entry points, which is the gray bar. On the flip side, Hanover has 5% market share, and they have more decision makers with 0 category entry points and fewer decision makers with 6 or more category entry points. So linking your brand to more relevant buying situations in the minds of more buyers drives more customer acquisition. And it also drives more customer retention. So this business insurance data shows that across the board, brands with more category entry point linkages tend to have a lower probability of defection. The lines trending down illustrate that as category entry points increase, the probability of defection decreases. So category entry points drive both acquisition and retention, the 2 levers for sales growth, which is why category entry points help you win the mind to win the market. And so folks, if I can leave you with one thing today, it's that you absolutely need to win the mind to win the market. And category entry points are your guide to messaging for memory, not for clicks. So follow this formula RMB to stay remembered. Reach the whole category, message your key category entry points that as we discussed at length today, and brand everything. So the study of category entry points fits squarely into a broader ambition of the B2B Institute. help marketers better align with finance to measure and report on the commercial benefits of brand building. All right, folks, so as we wrap up this presentation here, the QR codes on this slide are active if you have your phone handy. I hope that today's talk helped you see the concept of marketing relevance in a new way and see its connection to branding and creativity as well. If we understand category entry points, we can build memories that make it more likely your brand will be thought of in relevant buying situations. And that's in line with the long-term goal of creating wider, fresher, useful brand memories. So do feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in taking a capital allocation approach to your messaging strategy, you can find the full report at b2binstitute.org. Thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Connect with each other and enjoy the content.
Good afternoon, Ty. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks so much for having me, everyone.
It's an absolute pleasure, and we all welcome you. And I can see the questions are flying in from your talk. Thank you for presenting. I know how recent this research is, and how important it is, and how well received it's been all around the world. So thank you for taking us through it. I love how you frame how messaging decisions are capital allocation for marketers. There's scarcity, right? They're limited resources, for messaging capital, if you will. Given that in B2B, we're marketing to a group of people, a buying center, if you will, that have multiple people and with multiple needs and different motivations and boxes they need to tick, how do we think that through? How do we think about the layers of messaging given the scarcity of allocation for messaging capital? Talk us through that.
Right. Yes. So first of all, yeah, I think this research, I'm really proud of this work because I think it's going to be very revolutionary for marketers in terms of thinking about messaging discipline and solving for what you just said, which is there's in B2B buying, there's a buying committee. There are multiple people across the businesses, across business lines that all influence decision. But when you think about it, as you just said, we have to prioritize the way we allocate our time, our budget. And sometimes it's not so much about thinking about the role of the person. It's more about prioritizing what puts them into that buying situation and what are the most common relevant buying situations that move them from out market into in market. And that's, if we message for that, as I said, with that long short list, it can help us get to our destination more quickly. So what we want to do instead is thinking about what is the strategy that optimizes for mental availability? How do we identify those different situations that across the buying committee, those needs and triggers that cause them to enter the market? So that's what I would encourage folks to think of. That cuts through B2B, it cuts through B2C, it cuts through the buying committee. It's all of the different things that put you in that buying situation is what you want to prioritize.
You know, it's so interesting you talk about that. And when I think about in South Africa, how things play out, and when I look at brands, you know, in South Africa, we have a lot of B2B brands, but in the majority of advertisers, those B2B brands are a component of a larger organization that is both B2C and B2B. And very often in the B2B part of that allocation, they rely on the brand building or the awareness from the B2C component of the brand, and they benefit off the halo effect of that brand. So we tend to see that a lot, and we also tend to see that the brand work, this awareness work, this 5% work, driving emotion, it links to values, it links these values of the brand to the core audiences. Now, in your presentation, the argument is to focus brand awareness around messaging within these entry points, within these CEPs. I'm curious, is there a place for both? If we have this limited messaging, how do we trade this off? Talk us through how we think that through.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things to take apart in here. So the first thing is to really think about the fact that it's time for a transformation in the way that we think about B2B. So you've got B2B buying situations, you've got B2C buying situations, and I think there's a distinction for us to make, right? So brand is about memory building, and as you said, there's probably a halo that you get from the B2C side. However, we have to really honestly ask ourselves the question, does that halo effect, does that branding influence someone to think about the B2B component in a relevant buying situation that will help us in the longer term? So yes, we absolutely need sales activation because we need to capture the latent demand and convert people. But the sales activation approach is very unlikely to be memorable in the long term. So those effects don't last and they do little to foster long-term growth, which is really what we need in B2B. And then when you think about the buying situation, the B2C messaging may not be influencing that from a B2B standpoint. So let me give you an example to help kind of bring this home. If you think about one of the largest brands in the world, Salesforce, right? So Salesforce has a customer relationship management tool that helps teams collaborate. So many business people have heard about Salesforce. So you know about the logo, the event, the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco. But for all its fame and market share growth, they had a pesky underlying issue, which is that people weren't clear on what Salesforce actually sold, right? And so brands grow when they come readily to a buyer's mind in as many buying situations as possible. So the concept that we have to think about is not only the long term being mentally available and moving people from out market to in market, we also, as I just shared in the presentation, have to be situationally aware, right? So that's where Salesforce developed a campaign called Trailblazers in 2019, where they began to link the relevant buying situations to their solutions. And so that, for example, they had a campaign about how to bring government and citizens together, one how to bring manufacturers and customers together. So we can't rely only on the B2C halo effect because it may not be getting the mental availability and it may not also be translating the situational awareness as well.
I love how you speak about context. And, at the end of the day, it's the same individual who exists in a consumer context as they do in a business context, the same decision maker, but their context changes. So when we think about category entry, when we think about category entry points, theoretically, the same principles apply B2C and B2B, but this is out of the B2B Institute. What's the difference?
Right. So what is the difference? So versus B2B versus B2C.
Yeah, when we think about category entry points and mental availability and how we apply that, what's the difference?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the difference is, and if you think about the long-term aspect of B2B buying, B2B buyers are going to take a longer sales cycle. You think about it when you buy a computer, or when you buy a analytics software for your company. When you buy it once, more than likely it's going to be another couple of years, maybe longer before you need it. This is why for B2B, one of the key distinctions is the long-term approach. Yes. This is where the mental thought of in the buying situation is really key. The other thing, I think another key distinction for us to think about is how you reach the entire category and the definition of a category for B2B. So in B2C, you're selling toothpaste, you market to everyone that has teeth, right? But what we want to focus on in B2B is the category relevance, right? So not everyone's going to buy cloud computing, but you do want to have reach. We're reach maximalists at the B2B Institute. So you want to reach everyone in the category that could possibly buy cloud solutions. So we don't want to hyper target. So similar to B2C, we want that reach, but we want relevant reach. So those are the two key things I would say for people to think about in terms of B2B. And then B2B creativity is huge. That's another area where we could learn from B2C, because using emotion, using storytelling, bringing in characters, logos, all of those things that B2C does are things we also want to bring to B2B because those are memory devices.
Thank you, Ty. That was fantastic. We appreciate your work. All the best.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Cheers, everybody.